Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to part 6, I guess the final part here of my Fabreeko Rook Build series. Today we are going to be flashing Klipper onto the SKR Mini E3 and then we'll go into the config file and we'll just chat about a couple things. I already have a video or videos on my channel of installing Klipper from scratch on like a Raspberry Pi and stuff like that. If you want to have an updated video on how to install Klipper from start to finish for 2024, leave a comment below and I'll make a updated kind of series on how to install Klipper start to finish, that type of thing. But for today, we're just gonna actually be installing Klipper on the board. I already have Klipper running on a laptop. You know, if you had Klipper running on a Raspberry Pi or something like that, the process would be the same. So I'm going to show you how to flash Klipper onto this board, and we'll talk about kind of the config file for the Rook. So let's hop on over to my computer. All right, so here we are on my PC, and the first thing that you want to do when you're flashing Klipper to your main board is you want to go to your manufacturer's GitHub website, essentially. For the most part, it's going to be Bigtree Tech, but it could be MKS or maybe FiSec or something like that. But what we're doing right now is we're going to set the Rook up with the SKR Mini E3. That's kind of the spec for the Rook. So what I did was I went to Bigtree Tech's GitHub, and you can see here we are on the SKR Mini E3 page here. You'll notice here there's a firmware folder. We're going to go into the firmware folder and we're going to choose our version of the Mini E3. There's a couple different versions. Most people are going to be running version 3, but you know, version 2 might still be out there. Click whichever version you have, and then we are going to click on the Klipper folder. What we're looking for here is, or at least what I'm generally looking for, is this screenshot. This is the most important and the easiest way to flash Klipper is find the actual build screen for your mainboard. This is the best way to make sure all your settings are absolutely correct. Bigtree Tech does have like a full guide here on how to actually compile the firmware. But for this video, basically, we're just looking at this picture here. Like I say, it is the most helpful. So now that we found our build screen for our mainboard, we're going to putty into our Klipper machine. So this is our Raspberry Pi, or this is our laptop that's running Klipper. So if I go down to putty here, we can see I have successfully logged into my Klipper laptop. Now, almost everyone installing Klipper, I highly recommend you install Klipper Installation and Update Helper. And this is covered in my video tutorial that I've done on my channel. What the Klipper Installation and Update Helper will do is it makes your life much easier because everything is done via a menu. There's no commands you need to know or anything like that. It makes your life way easier for building firmware and things like that. So I have Klipper Update Installation Helper installed on my laptop, so I can literally just hit the up arrow and I can run the actual script for that program. So we're going to just enter it here. And you can see we're at the main menu for KIAUH or Klipper Installation Update Helper. You can see here I have 4 instances of Klipper installed on my laptop. I have main cell installed, which is my web interface of choice, and that's basically it. What we're going to do here is we're actually going to go into the advanced settings, which is the number 4 we can see right here. We are going to build firmware for our main board. So we're going to hit number 2. And now you can see we're at the exact screen that we want to be here. So What we're going to be doing is we're going to be configuring this exactly how it's shown on here. So enable extra low-level options is selected as it is in the top. We're going to be changing our processor to a STM32. We're going to be changing our processor to the STM32G0B1. So we'll go down here. This might get cut off a little bit, but G0B1 is what we're looking for, which is right there. Let's move this back down. So again, double check, make sure that is correct. A lot of them kind of look similar. Our bootloader. So this is saying the 8K bootloader, but we have an additional option in here. I believe this is an older screenshot, so the 8K bootloader is fine. We have our 8K crystal, and one of the most important things is our communication interface. We are communicating over USB, and we want to make sure our I/O is correct here, so PA11 and PA12, and that's correct. No other options are selected. So what we can do now is we can quit with Q, and we're going to hit Y. This is now compiling our bin file, and one of the benefits of being on a laptop, it's massively faster than a Raspberry Pi. So our bin file has been created, and you can actually see it created the bin file right here for us. So the next step is we need to now get onto our Klipper machine and grab that bin file. There's a lot of different ways to do this. If you're on a Mac, I believe you want to use FileZilla. If you're on Windows, you're going to use WinSCP. So I'm on Windows, so we're going to do WinSCP here. So here we have WinSCP. So basically this allows us to FTP into our Klipper machine and grab this bin file. Like I say, there's a bunch of different ways to do this. I'm going to just show this way here. If you have any trouble with this part of it, feel free to join my Discord. A lot of people there can help you with this step. But we are going to go to my Klipper laptop. I think it's 113. I'm going to put in my user. Perfect. So we have now connected to my Klipper laptop. So on the right-hand side here, you can see all the folders on my laptop. So this has said that it created a file, a bin file for us under out in Klipper. And I know that the out folder is located in the Klipper directory. So we're just going to double-click Klipper, and we're going to double-click out. And we can see here is our bin file. I always like to confirm the date and time to know that this is the file I created. So this is correct. It's the 31st and 2:23 p.m. So what I'm going to do is usually I'll put this in my documents and I'll make a folder in here. So I'm going to call this mini E3. Go into here and we're simply just going to drag and drop the bin file. So I've now taken a copy of the bin file and I've copied it to my local computer that I'm on right now. So we can close down WinSCP, we're done with that. And we're not quite done with Klipper installation and update helper, so I'm going to leave that open. But what we need to do now is we need to rename our bin file and we need to put it onto an SD card. So let's go over and go into our documents folder and let's take a look at that bin file. All right, so here we have our Klipper.bin that we copied from our Klipper machine over to our desktop. We're going to go ahead and rename this to firmware. Most mainboards want this file called firmware, but double check for your mainboard. Like I say, on the GitHub page, it will say what you should name the file to. I believe for the most part, Corality just wants you to name the bin file something other than the previous name. So if it was firmware, at one point you would name it to like firmware 1, firmware 2, whatever. But for Big Tree Tech boards, we're just renaming this to firmware.bin. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to copy this and we're going to pop it onto our SD card. Now, a couple tips for you. I highly recommend you don't use a SD card larger than 8 gigabytes. And you want to make sure the SD card is formatted in FAT32. If I go to my SD card here, we should be able to see some information on it. So you can see this is a FAT32 card, and I'm actually using a really small 4 gig one that I got randomly for with a main board or something like that. So if you're using a larger card, most times 16 gig cards will work too, but you want to have a small card because some boards can't read large SD cards and you have to get into partitioning them and all sorts of stuff. So I recommend having some really small SD cards lying around, 8 gig or smaller, so that you can do this. Another tip is when you flash the bin file, most people get this step, they have the most problem with this step, flashing Klipper to the main board. A great tip is to, if you want to check if your actual bin file flashed, is take the SD card back out of your board and take a look at it. You'll see a firmware.cur. That tells me that my bin file did flash to the main board. Now, that's only one step. That just means that I've flashed Klipper to the main board. That doesn't necessarily mean that my USB settings are right or anything like that. So even though you see this firmware.cur, you might still have connectivity issues with your actual board. So this is just one tip to just make sure, okay, my processor setting was correct, my SD card works, it did flash to the board. So this is from another printer, we don't care about that. I'm just going to actually copy or paste my firmware.bin to the SD card. I'm now going to take this SD card out of my computer. I'm going to put it into my Big Tree Tech Mini E3 that is on my Rook, and I'm going to power it on, and it's going to flash Klipper onto that main board. All right, so I put the SD card into my main board on my Rook, and I powered it on. I gave it a couple moments, and I've plugged the USB cable into my laptop, or in your case, you might plug it into your Raspberry Pi or whichever you're using to run Klipper. So the next thing we need to do is we need to get our ID so our Klipper machine can talk to our main board. So again, we're going to go into PuTTY here. We are in the Klipper installation and update helper. We're going to go under the advanced options under 4, and we're going to get our MCU ID, which is number 5. We are communicating over USB, which is the number 1 option. And you can see here, we have an MCU ID. This tells me that I've successfully flashed Klipper onto my Big Tree Tech Mini E3, and my settings are correct. If you do not see this come up, this blue line here with your ID, that means you have something incorrect in your bin file, or maybe you have a bad USB cable or a bad SD card. You must have a USB data cable. Usually you'll get one with your main board, so definitely you want to try to use that one. And make sure you don't have a corrupt SD card or something like that. Maybe do a fresh format of your SD card and get a known good USB cable and try to flash again, and also double check your settings. This is probably where most people have the most trouble because there's no error messages to tell you what went wrong. It either works or it doesn't. And in my experience, generally, it's because your SD card was like too big and the main board couldn't read it, or your SD card is corrupt, or you've put in the wrong settings for your main board. Like I say, with Creality boards, A lot of people get this communication interface wrong. It's set to like something else, or the pins are wrong or something like that. So just really pay attention to that screenshot on how to actually build your bin file. So we have our ID, so I'm going to go ahead and Control C and I'm going to copy that. I have my Klipper laptop web interface opened up here, which is mainsail, and I am going to go into my printer.cfg and I'm going to paste in my ID. Just like so. And we're going to save and restart Klipper, and we'll see what happens here. And as you can see, I have successfully connected to Klipper. I have two Klipper instances here. This is my laptop and this is my main board. And if we go to dashboard, we're reading temperatures and everything's working well. Now, I am using the Fabreeko Rook config file that Kanrog has. Kanrog is a member of the Rolohan design team, and he has a Rook config file on his GitHub. So if we go to Google and we just type in Kanrog GitHub, you can see his GitHub here, and he has config files for all sorts of different printers here. We can go into Klipper config under Rook. I went into Fabreeko Kit and I grabbed these 3 config files. You may need to change some settings in these config files depending on your printer, but for the most part, most of this stuff will be configured for you. So again, I took those config files and I put them into my Klipper. You can either download them from GitHub and upload them into here, or you can create new files, blank files, and just copy and paste the information inside. If we click on one of these, you can simply just copy and paste the information on the inside. Kanrog has some really nice quality of life stuff in here already. So he has homing override set up so that sensorless homing works better, things like that. Most of all of this stuff is configured properly for you. So this is, I won't go too much into the config file. It's relatively straightforward for the most part based on Klipper. You know, we have our X axes here configured. We have our Y. Z is configured. You know, all of this is set up for a Rook MK1. You may need to come in here and change your thermistor type. That would be something that you would need to change. And also your bed thermistor type, depending on what bed thermistor you're using. For the most part, you're not gonna, do a whole bunch. Now, this config file does already have some input shaper data configured, which won't really be valid for your printer. You should run your own input shaper with an accelerometer and stuff like that. I would also recommend you PID tune your hot end and your bed as well. So that's kind of a rundown on how to actually install Klipper onto a Big Tree Tech mainboard. Like I say, if anyone wants a updated 2024 video on how to install Klipper from start to finish, please leave some comments below. I'm more than happy on doing a larger series on this that's a bit more updated, and I would be very interested in what people would like to see. Do they want me to do it on a Raspberry Pi, on a laptop, on a Big Tree Tech Pi? Those are kind of the 3 most common things I would think. I really like the Big Tree Tech Pi. It's very affordable, well documented, and very easy to use. It's got some really cool features. If you can find a Raspberry Pi cheap, that's another great option. For someone like me that builds a printer pretty much every week, a laptop is a much better option for me because I can save like $50 per printer because I can use the same laptop to control all my printers. You can see here I have 4 printers set up. I have my Panda Mini, I've got my Rook 2020 MK1, I've got Cappy, and I've got a Rook MK1 on here. So, this could potentially be $200 if I had to buy a Pi for each one of these. So That's why I like an old desktop or laptop to run Klipper. Wi-Fi is also much better on a laptop than a Raspberry Pi. They're much faster, you know, that type of thing. So again, thanks for watching, everyone, on this part 6 of my Rook build video. And what I'll probably do is I'll probably do maybe a 7th video if someone wants to see like the Rook printing and that type of thing. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I've shown off a Rook printing in many of my videos before. I've got some really good live streams now of the Rook printing. If anyone's interested, I have a really good Rook 2020 calibration live stream. We go in through calibrating your extruder, rotation distance, pressure advanced, and flow. I highly recommend everyone check out the Ellis tuning guide. I'll put that in the description below. Actually, we can go to it right now just so you can kind of see. This is really the definitive guide for getting your printer to start printing well. And there's 3 main things that you really want to do for every 3D printer. And that is the extruder calibration, right? You want to calibrate your rotation distance, and I have an excellent calculator on my website, rolohan3d.ca. Once your rotation distance is calibrated, you then want to start calibrating pressure advance. There's a lot of good information on here on how to calibrate pressure advance from the Ellis tuning guide. The Orca slicer has some really good pressure advance calibration tools that make it very easy to tune. And then what I think a lot of people don't know is calibrating your extrusion multiplier or flow is very important, especially if you're printing multiple parts that need to fit together. These are the 3 most important things you need to calibrate on every printer. And even if I'm using Kanrog's config, I'm still going to calibrate my extruder, right? So if I go into my printer.cfg under my extruder, under rotation distance, yeah, this is a rotation distance for a BMG, but it might be slightly different for my printer. I might have a slightly, my BMG might not push as much filament as it should, and I might need a slightly different number here. So it doesn't matter if you're using the exact same parts as somebody. I always recommend you do PID tuning and you calibrate your rotation distance for your extruder. So again, thanks everyone for watching. If you'd like to support me, check out my Patreon. There's going to be a lot more videos coming out. I have some cool videos coming out on my new Panda printer. There's going to be more Panda Mini videos and all sorts of stuff. So thanks again, everyone, and I'll catch you next time.